Has the Vatican just sacrificed the papacy on the altar of ecumenism? Join us with the story few journalists dare to talk about. Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, where does the Vatican, or at least the Dicastery there, and the Orthodox Church have reached an agreement that Peter might not be the rock upon which Christ founded his church? What's going on?
Last week in Alexandria, the Vatican Dicastery for promoting Christian unity met with 10 Orthodox churches. The Orthodox conglomeration, of course, was headed by Patriarch Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch, and they produced this declaration about how Catholics and Orthodox can go ahead with a common reading of ecclesiastical history over the second millennium in this case.
Is this, before we get into the real serious details there, Jules, this so-called ecumenical dialogue, that's been going on for quite some time now under the Francis papacy?
It started with Vatican II when the Orthodox and the Catholics lifted mutual excommunications that were imposed in 1054 AD. But under Francis, you're right, his personal friendship with the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew has made things has brought these two churches much closer together, and Francis and Bartholomew meet often. Their meetings, their embraces are very warm. And it's not surprising that this has trickled down to historians and theologians working together on the ground, Brad.
This seems, though, rather groundbreaking, Jules. I mean, can you get into the details specifically of this document, this joint document?
It is a complex document, Brad, and I would urge our viewers to go to the Dicastery's website and read it. It's also in English, apart from Italian, but I've picked up some of the highlights of this document. So let me talk about at least 6 of these highlights very quickly. First of all, it kind of affirms that the first church, the embryonic church, was not Roman Catholic as we understand it, but a group of local churches existing in unity, but also sharing diversity. Secondly, this unity was expressed through synodality. And synodality is a meeting of bishops who reign in their own territories, obviously, but come together to discuss points of doctrine and practice when there is a need. Thirdly, there was a primacy given to the See of Peter, to the Bishop of Rome, but it was a primacy of honor and not a primacy of supremacy. The understanding of papal supremacy developed in the West and not in the East, and it was rejected by the East. That's what the document says. Fourthly, the document also talks about things like the false decretals of Pseudo-Isidore coming from the 9th century and the donation of Constantine coming from the 8th century. These forgeries, also accepted as forgeries by Catholics, today contributed to a more exalted understanding of the papacy. Fifthly, it talks about how Vatican I gave the final stamp to papal supremacy, but the Orthodox regarded this as unacceptable because they saw it as a radical departure from Scripture and the Fathers. And sixthly, it brings up the issue of papal infallibility, but it says that infallibility belongs to the Church as a whole.
Well, it's kind of not so big a news that the Orthodox would hold those positions, but that the Dicastery would sign on to them, because that doesn't seem to ring true with what the Church herself understands herself as being founded on Peter, meaning the Petrine office, that Petrine office has always been a reality, even though it's been exercised in different ways throughout history. Why do you think, Jules, though, the media is so silent about this?
I think this is a very complex issue, Brad, and most journalists are not trained historians or theologians or, have no advanced graduate degrees in any of these fields. And so it makes difficult reading, and it makes it difficult to distill the essence of the whole thing in the light of centuries of church history. And it's not very sensationalistic from a reporting point of view, I guess.
Do you think the Vatican is doing this just to appease the Orthodox?
Well, that's a question we cannot answer, because the Vatican has its own, the Dicastery, the 18 members of the Dicastery. I tried looking for their names. They haven't yet issued the names, and I would like to talk personally to some of them and find out who they are, what their qualifications are, and what their understanding of church history, doctrine, and dogma is.
Now, there was an earlier declaration, Jules, a Chieti declaration that kind of dovetailed all, flowed into this one. Could you flesh that one out for us?
Now, that's very important, Brad, because if you want to understand the Alexandria Declaration, you need to read the Chieti Declaration. The Orthodox and the Roman Catholics met in Chieti, which is a place in Italy, in 2016. And here they hammered out this declaration. Now, here it's very clear in the Chieti Declaration that when they talk about primacy, they talk about Christ as having the primacy because he's the head. And that primacy devolves from Jesus to each bishop. That's the understanding of primacy. Secondly, bishops share a responsibility for the whole church. And thirdly, they say that the Chieti Declaration says that the West departed from this understanding. Now, of course, they talk about hopes for the future, which we will get into. But the Alexandria Declaration talks about what happened historically in the second millennium. The Chieti Declaration talks about the development of Petrine understanding, etc., in the first millennium.
It'd be nice if some of this practice of this synodality would have trickled down in 2018 when the bishops in this country wanted to explore how McCarrick rose to power, and of course they were shut down by Rome. Also, it would be nice if this also fell into practice in recent days when, local bishops want to ordain men and give them the faculties to say the TLM, and Rome says, no, you have to go to Rome for that. So it doesn't seem like, it seems like the opposite today, where the Pope that's trying to sign on with synodality, this understanding, isn't always keeping in practice with that. Do you think this is a milestone on the road to unity with the Orthodox, so Jules? And if we unite based on this declaration, will the office of the Pope significantly change in your view?
Well, absolutely. That is the whole point of the declaration, that the Bishop of Rome will continue to be regarded as the first among equals, but he will not have universal declaration, as the Orthodox claim he did not have during the first millennium. The whole business of synodality that you just mentioned is regarded very highly, because this declaration says that Pope Francis himself now has opened the doors for synodality, and he is indeed taking the church in a more synodal direction, which means he's taking the church in a direction that the Orthodox affirm. Now, as you rightly pointed out, there is an internal contradiction in Francis's own behavior, because at times he wants to go down the synodal path, but at other times he wants to go down the path of micromanaging things to the extent of deciding, whether bishops should ordain particular people in particular dioceses. Well,
that's the difficulty in interpreting the Francis papacy there, watching what he says and what he does. But we do know that Christ said, Peter, you are the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Well, right now those gates seem to be gaping wide open, but we trust Christ to keep his promise. Jules, thanks for bringing us this difficult story.
Thank you, Brad.